He stopped at a dusty roadside cafe, just a break from the noise. No staff, no customers. But instead of a waitress, a barefoot little girl appeared with a notepad in hand, and a name that shook him to his core. Ellie, she said. What came next unraveled a past he thought he'd left behind, and led him to a truth he never saw coming. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're watching from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories like this can travel. The Tennessee sun hung low as Graham Whitaker eased his sleek black Lexus off the interstate and onto a cracked two-lane road winding through farmland. Dust kicked up behind him, curling in the rearview mirror like a ghost tail. He wasn't sure what town this was. In fact, he wasn't even sure he cared. His tie hung loose at his collar. The crisp sky blue suit tailored in Milan clung to his frame like it didn't belong out here among rusted signs and wilting mailboxes. But nothing in Graham's life felt like it belonged anymore. 3 hours earlier, he'd been in a high-rise boardroom in downtown Chicago, overlooking the skyline that bore his name. Whitaker Energy Solutions was worth $3.2 billion, according to Forbes. There were 3 secretaries, 2 personal drivers, and one hell of a publicist to keep his days running smooth. But this morning, midway through a meeting about carbon-neutral infrastructure partnerships, something in him snapped. His COO was talking about green cement. His mind was somewhere else entirely. Not on numbers, not on strategy, just done. He'd stood up mid-sentence, muttered something about needing air, and walked out. Past the polished marble lobby, past the stairs, past the emails blowing up his phone. No suitcase, no plan, just Graham and the road. And now, after hours of driving, his stomach growled like an animal in a cage. His phone battery was dead. His jacket was tossed in the back seat, wrinkled. His soul felt the same. That's when he saw it. A rundown roadside cafe with a sun-bleached sign that read, "Barely, Sonny's." The wood around the door was warped, paint chipping like old nail polish. The screen door hung slightly crooked. It was exactly the kind of place Graham would have avoided his whole adult life. Too humble, too worn, too real. But something about it tugged at him. Maybe it was the weariness in his bones, maybe the nostalgia of southern heat. Maybe fate had grown tired of waiting politely. He parked. Gravel crunched beneath his Italian leather shoes as he stepped out. He looked ridiculous here, like a corporate exec had been dropped into a country postcard. When he pushed the door open, a faint bell chimed, though the sound was muffled, almost apologetic. The place was quiet, not dead-paused. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, catching floating flower motes in midair. 4 booths, mismatched chairs, a counter with faded red stools, the smell of strong coffee, warm butter, and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. No music, no murmurs, just stillness. Graham stepped in slowly, the door closing behind him with a soft thunk. He took a seat at the window. His shoulders sank into the vinyl booth like he hadn't sat still in a decade. He ran a hand through his thick, dark brown hair, neatly parted earlier that day, but now tousled. His eyes scanned the cafe. No other customers, no waitress. He sighed, rubbed his temples. That's when she appeared, small, barefoot, and certain. A little girl, no more than 6, stood beside the table holding a notepad in 2 hands. Her red apron was tied clumsily around her waist over a white t-shirt with a faded cartoon on it. Her hair light brown and pulled into a low-side ponytail, had a flyaway curl that bounced when she walked. "Would you like the breakfast special, sir?" she asked. Her voice was small but not timid, bright, clear, polite. Graham blinked, caught entirely off guard. He looked around, half expecting to see a mother peeking out from the back, smiling at the child's pretend game. But there was no one. Are you taking my order?" he asked, unsure whether to laugh or be alarmed. "Yes, sir," she said matter-of-factly, standing straighter. "My mama's in the kitchen. I help out. We don't have other workers right now, so I take orders and bring plates." She said it like she was explaining how to tie a shoe, like it wasn't unusual, like this was her world. Graham stared at her, the tilt of her head, the way she gripped the pen, the curve of her cheek. Something flickered deep inside him. Something uncomfortable. Something familiar. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ellie," she answered, then flipped open the notepad and poised her pen. "So, would you like coffee?" He exhaled, nodding slowly. "Yeah, coffee sounds good." "And do you want eggs? Pancakes? We have apple pie too, but Mama says it's not lunch if you start with dessert." He smiled, something in his chest unraveling just a little. "Pancakes are perfect." "Good choice." She jotted it down like a tiny executive and turned on her heel. "I'll tell my mama." As she pushed through the swinging door into the back, Graham sat very still. His hands gripped the edge of the table. His mind raced with something he couldn't name yet, just a whisper of it. Ellie. He mouthed the name, tasted it. Then he leaned back in the booth and stared at the kitchen door. Whatever he had come looking for when he fled that skyscraper, he had a feeling it was about to come walking back out of that kitchen, and it might just change everything. The kitchen door swung closed behind her, and Graham sat frozen in the booth, staring at the space where the little girl had just been. Ellie. The name lingered in his mind like a melody half-remembered, tugging at something buried deep. There was a steadiness in her too calm for 6, too aware. Her manners were polished, but not rehearsed, genuine. And those eyes, they reminded him of someone he hadn't thought about, hadn't let himself think about for years. He rubbed his jaw, glancing at the dusty sunlight slanting through the window, trying to shake the feeling that his entire world had just shifted 1 degree without warning. Then he heard it, the soft swing of the kitchen door opening again. He looked up and stopped breathing. She stood in the doorway holding a towel, flour smudged across her forearm and cheek. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a messy braid, loose strands clinging to her temple. Her apron was faded yellow, tied hastily around her waist. She wasn't made up. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. But Graham felt like he'd been hit square in the chest. "Anna," he said, standing slowly. Her eyes locked onto his, wide and stunned. Her fingers clenched the towel like it was the only thing keeping her upright. For a second, neither of them spoke. Time didn't move. The world, the sun, the buzzing fly near the window, all held its breath. "Graham?" Her voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Yeah," he said softly, unsure of what else to say. "It's me." Anna took a slow step forward, as though testing the reality of the moment. She blinked hard, like she wasn't sure he was real. What are you doing here?" He let out a shaky breath and shrugged. "I didn't plan on being here. I was driving, and I saw the cafe. I didn't even know it was yours." "You just happened to stop?" she said, arms now crossed, not defensive, but like she was holding herself together. "I swear, Anna, I didn't know." She didn't speak. Her expression was unreadable, her jaw set. Graham motioned gently to the booth. "Do you want to sit?" A pause. Then, carefully, she slid into the booth across from him, laying the towel down beside her. Her eyes flicked to the kitchen, toward where Ellie had disappeared, then back to Graham. "You saw her," she said. He nodded. "Yeah." "She took your order?" "She did." Anna let out a slow, measured breath, then leaned back, studying him like he might vanish if she blinked. He looked different, older, broader, more put together. But there was something unchanged in his eyes, that intense focus, that restlessness underneath the surface. "You haven't changed a bit," she murmured, but it wasn't a compliment. "Neither have you," he said, then added quietly, "Not where it counts." She gave a tight smile. "That depends who's doing the counting." Silence hung between them like an unwelcome guest. 7 years, she said finally, eyes narrowing. 7 years, Graham, and not even a phone call. "I know." "I tried," she said, her voice sharper now. "After you left, I called. You'd changed your number." "I was young," he said, "stupid and scared. I thought I had to get out, make something of myself. I thought maybe that was the only way." "So you left me behind." He swallowed hard. It wasn't supposed to be forever. But it was. Her tone cut deeper than the words. "You got on that plane and you didn't come back." He didn't argue. There was no defense. "I thought maybe, if I made it big, I could come back and make it right," he said. But the bigger everything got, the smaller that window seemed. I didn't know how to reach you. You didn't try, she said flatly. That's what hurt the most. He lowered his gaze, ashamed. You're right. She was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing the faded edge of the laminated menu on the table. I started this place 2 years ago, she said, almost to herself. Worked nights at the diner until I could afford it. It's not much, but it's ours. Graham looked around. It was humble, but there was warmth, care, 1,000 small touches that said someone had poured themselves into it. He could see it now. This cafe had been built not for profit, but survival, built with love. Anna, he said, barely above a whisper. That little girl. Ellie, She looked him straight in the eye. Yes, she said. Graham's stomach dropped. He stared at her, stunned. I thought so, he said slowly, voice tight. She looks like... you. He nodded, exhaling shakily. Jesus. I found out a few weeks after you left, Anna said. I tried once to reach you, but it didn't go through, and then I stopped. Why? Her expression shifted, tired but fierce. Because I wasn't going to beg someone to stay, especially not someone who chose to disappear. I made a decision. I chose her. He nodded slowly. The weight of her words hit like bricks. I never knew, he said. If I had... I believe you, she cut in, surprising him. You didn't know, but you do now. He sat back in the booth, the world rearranging itself around him. He had a daughter, a 6-year-old daughter, and she was smart and sweet and brave enough to run this cafe like it was her little kingdom. And he had missed everything. Her first words, her first steps, her birthday candles, her colds, her cries, her laughs. He missed it all. The kitchen door creaked open again, and Ellie peeked through, balancing a plate twice the size of her head. Mom? She asked. The eggs are ready. Anna quickly rose. I've got it, baby. Go wipe the counter, okay? Ellie nodded and disappeared again. Graham stood, unsure what to say, how to process what had just been dropped into his lap. She's incredible, he said quietly. She is. I don't know how to fix this, he added, but I want to. Anna paused, one hand on the counter. That's not something you say once, Graham. That's something you show, over time. He nodded. Then I'll show you. She studied him again, and for the first time since he walked in, her voice softened. Good, she said, because she's already starting to like you. And if she grows to love you... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Because the meaning hung in the air like a warning and a prayer at the same time. The clink of silverware and the low hum of the old fridge filled the silence between words. Graham sat in the same window booth, a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and thick-cut bacon in front of him, the food steaming gently under the late afternoon light. Across from him sat Ellie, swinging her legs and chatting nonstop like they were old friends and not near strangers with a secret neither had fully named. And this one, Ellie said, holding up a crayon drawing she had fetched from her coloring corner, is a hippo in space. He has a cookie-shaped rocket. Graham smiled, but it barely reached his eyes. That's one brave hippo. He likes oatmeal raisin best because chocolate chips melt in orbit, she explained seriously, as if she had personally tested the theory. Of course, Graham nodded. Everyone knows that. Ellie giggled and reached for another bite of pancake, syrup smudged across her cheek like a war stripe. She was radiant, unfiltered joy, wrapped in a child's voice and messy hair. She talked with the ease of someone who trusted naturally. It made something in Graham's chest ache in the worst way, because he hadn't earned that trust. Not yet. Maybe never. Across the cafe, Anna moved behind the counter, refilling the sugar jar and wiping down surfaces already clean. She wasn't hovering, but she wasn't far. Her eyes flicked over to them from time to time, watching, weighing. Graham could feel it, even when he wasn't looking. The way her body stiffened when Ellie laughed too loudly, the way her hand paused at the coffee pot when he leaned in too close. She was letting this moment happen, but only just. Ellie pushed her empty plate forward and wiped her hands on a napkin. Mom says apple pie is for dessert, she whispered conspiratorially, but sometimes if you had a hard day, you can have it during lunch. Graham chuckled. Have you had a hard day? She leaned in. Math was really hard this morning. Well then, he said, tapping the table, I think we need pie, immediately. She grinned and dashed off to the kitchen without asking. Left alone, Graham pushed his fork through the half-eaten eggs. His appetite had evaporated. Everything he'd once found comforting rich food, quiet space, a good view felt thin here. The weight of what he'd missed was a pit in his stomach no meal could fill. Anna returned with 2 slices of apple pie, one topped with a melting scoop of vanilla ice cream. She placed them down without a word, barely meeting his eyes, and turned to leave. Anna, he said quietly. She stopped, shoulders stiff. What? He glanced toward the kitchen door, making sure Ellie was out of earshot. Then he looked up at her fully. You did this, all of it, on your own? She hesitated. Yeah. You raised her, built this place, took care of everything while you were gone, she finished for him. Her voice wasn't angry, just steady, like she'd long accepted the truth he was only now facing. I didn't know, he said. I believe you, she replied, folding her arms. But it doesn't make a difference. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for help. I worked nights, skipped meals, borrowed just enough to get this cafe started. I learned how to clean drains and unclog a fryer because I couldn't afford a plumber. I did what I had to do. For her. He looked down at the table, shame crawling up the back of his neck. I wanted to reach out, she continued, softer now. At the beginning, when the test came back positive, I stared at my phone for an hour, but I knew you were already boarding that flight. You'd made your choice. It wasn't a choice against you, he murmured. Maybe not, she said, but it felt like one. Silence stretched between them, thick and loaded. I thought, she added, that if I chased after someone who already left, I'd be teaching Ellie that love was something you begged for. I wouldn't do that to her. Graham's throat tightened. I don't know how to make this right, he said after a moment. I missed 6 years. I missed everything. But I'm here now. I want to be in her life. I want to know her, to be there for real. Anna looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, the steel in her eyes cracked just barely. You want to be in her life? She said, her voice low. Then start showing up. Don't just say it. I will, he promised. Good, she replied, stepping back. Because Ellie? She's not like other kids. She'll believe you. And if you let her down, it won't just be her heart breaking. I won't let her down, he said, the words heavy with meaning. Anna gave a single nod, then turned and walked away. Ellie returned moments later, a fork in one hand and her coloring page in the other. I think the hippo should have sunglasses. Even space gets bright, right? Graham smiled and reached for a crayon. Right. As she leaned against him and began to color, her little shoulder bumping into his, he realized something important. This was no longer about making up for the past. It was about proving he belonged in their future. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly, just past 8. BCEOs on 0 a.m. on Sunday morning. Sunlight filtered through the dusty front windows, painting the checkered floor in sleepy golden squares. Anna was behind the counter, prepping pancake batter, half humming along with the old country song playing low from the radio when she heard the door open. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Ellie, standing on a milk crate to reach the silverware bin, let out a squeal before Anna could even wipe her hands. You came back, Ellie shouted, hopping down and racing toward him with syrup-sticky hands and wild morning hair. Graham knelt down, arms open. Told you I would, didn't I? She launched herself into his chest, and he caught her easily, smiling against the weight of her as she squeezed him tight. Anna looked over from behind the counter, cautious but not cold. Her eyes flicked from Ellie to Graham, lingering a beat longer than the week before. You're early, she said, reaching for the whisk again. Didn't want to miss the breakfast rush, he replied, hanging his coat on a nearby hook, like it was the most natural thing in the world. We don't open for another 20 minutes. I know, he said, already rolling up his sleeves. Figured you could use an extra pair of hands. Anna raised an eyebrow. Since when do CEOs volunteer for kitchen duty? Graham grinned. Since one of them found out he has a kid who makes world-class pancakes. Ellie beamed. They're mostly round now, sometimes. Anna gave a soft laugh, small but real, and handed him a bowl. Crack these eggs. Try not to make a mess. He did his best, but 2 shells shattered on the edge of the bowl like glass under pressure, splattering yolk across the counter and onto his watch. Ellie giggled uncontrollably. Anna winced. Wow, she said dryly. Precision cracking. You're really bringing your A game. Graham wiped his hands on a towel, grinning like a kid. Hey, I never said I was qualified. You're not, Anna replied, handing him a whisk. But you're trying. They worked together in an awkward dance, him bumping into cabinet doors, burning a slice of toast, knocking over the sugar tin. Ellie buzzed between them like a firefly, handing out napkins and supervising the mixing with the authority of someone who took breakfast very seriously. By the time the first regular wandered in, a balding man in his 60s who always ordered black coffee and left exact change, Ellie was already standing at the counter, pen in hand. This is my daddy who helps with syrup, she announced proudly, pointing at Graham. The man gave a friendly chuckle, eyeing Graham's flour-dusted shirt. Well, he's dressed better than the last fella that helped out. That suit from New York? Chicago, Graham replied with a sheepish smile, pouring coffee like he hadn't spent years paying others to do it for him. Fancy, the man muttered, but nodded. Don't matter. Kid seems happy. That seemed to be the theme of the morning. Ellie introduced Graham to everyone who came in, grinning like it was the greatest secret she'd ever gotten to share. My daddy helped stir the batter. My daddy toasted the toast. Sort of. My daddy made the orange juice, but it's a little pulpy. That's okay. Each time, Graham's heart squeezed in his chest. He didn't correct her, not once. He didn't know if it was too soon or too bold, but every time she said, my daddy, something in him locked into place. He hadn't earned it, not yet, but she had already given it to him. By late morning, the cafe buzzed with laughter, coffee, and syrup-stained napkins. Graham moved behind the counter like he belonged there, still clumsy, still learning, but present. Actually present. No phone, no email, no board meetings, just pancakes, a 6-year-old's stories, and the occasional sarcastic glance from Anna when he nearly overflowed the coffee machine again. When the rush died down and the last plate was scraped clean, Graham leaned against the prep table, breathing hard, but smiling. Anna stood beside him, wiping her hands with a rag. She looked at him, really looked. He was sweating through his dress shirt, a smear of batter on his forearm, a tiny crayon drawing stuck to the back of his notepad, courtesy of Ellie. But he looked happy. She hadn't seen him like that since before everything. You're still here, she said quietly. I said I'd be. She nodded, folding the rag in her hands. I just didn't think you'd actually show. I didn't either, he admitted. That made her laugh, low, honest, unexpected. She caught herself afterward like she hadn't meant to let it slip, but Graham had noticed. Breakfast next Sunday? He asked. She paused, then nodded once. Ellie came barreling out of the back, holding a plate with a slightly misshapen pancake shaped vaguely like a dinosaur. I saved you the best one, she said proudly, holding it up to Graham. He took it carefully, crouching to her level. Looks like a T-Rex to me. Nope, she said confidently. It's a pancakeosaurus. He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that filled the room. And for the first time in years, maybe longer, Graham Whitaker didn't feel like he had to earn his place at the table with dollars or decisions, just by being there, by showing up. Anna watched them from behind the counter, towel in hand, heart caught somewhere between worry and something dangerously close to hope. She wasn't ready to call it anything yet, but she was ready to keep the door unlocked, at least on Sundays. The cafe was quiet that Tuesday afternoon, the late lunch crowd long gone, and only the hum of the fridge and the faint clatter of Ellie playing in the back room, breaking the silence. Anna moved behind the counter, refilling sugar jars and wiping down surfaces with a practiced rhythm. She'd always found peace in the routine after years of chaos. Order was a kind of survival. But lately, something in the air felt different, softer, like the silence wasn't so lonely anymore. She reached to wipe a coffee stain near the cash register when something colorful caught her eye, taped haphazardly to the wall beside the order window. She leaned in, eyes narrowing, and gently peeled back a slightly wrinkled sheet of construction paper. Crayon marks, thick, bold lines. 3 stick figures stood under a lopsided yellow sun. One had long brown hair and a pink triangle dress, Mommy, scribbled in shaky block letters above. Next to her, a smaller figure with wild curls and a purple shirt, Me. And to the left, slightly taller, was a third figure with spiky brown hair and what looked like a tie. Over his head, written proudly in green crayon, My Daddy. Anna stood there for a long moment, fingers trembling slightly as she held the drawing in both hands. Her throat tightened. The picture wasn't perfect. The sun had too many rays. The proportions were off. But none of that mattered, because to Ellie, it was real. She didn't hear Graham walk in until he cleared his throat gently behind her. I didn't know she'd taped it up, he said, voice low, unsure. Anna blinked fast and turned, quickly wiping at the corners of her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. She's been drawing a lot lately, she said, trying to sound casual. I saw one the other day, he offered, stepping closer. A hippo in a space rocket made of cookies. Anna chuckled softly despite herself. She's got a wild imagination. She also has a big heart, he said. Then after a pause, just like her mom. Anna looked up at him, eyes searching. You're not just here for pancakes and coloring books, are you? No, he said quietly. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. No logo, no label. Just her name written in his careful handwriting. She hesitated before taking it, fingers brushing his as she slid it free. What is this? Something real, he replied. Something that doesn't disappear the minute I leave. Anna slowly opened the envelope and slid out the papers. Legal documents, custody registration, parental rights acknowledgement. All signed, all ready. Her breath caught. You want joint custody? He nodded. Not to take her, never that. I just wanted in writing that I'm not a visitor in her life, that she knows legally, emotionally, permanently, I'm here. Anna stared at the papers, then at him. Her eyes were guarded, but behind them, something flickered. Uncertainty, yes, but also something else. Hope, maybe, or trust trying to find its footing again. That's a lot of change, she said softly, for a little girl who's just starting to feel safe. Graham took a deep breath, then stepped closer. I know, he said. That's why I'm starting with the paperwork and not promises. Anyone can say they'll be there, but this is proof. You can say no. I won't push. Anna didn't speak right away. She looked down at the drawing still in her other hand, the crooked sun, the green crayon letters, the 3 simple stick figures. She already believes you'll stay, she whispered finally. Her voice cracked just slightly. I think I'm starting to believe it too. The words hung between them like a fragile thread, stretched but not broken. For the first time, it felt like the ground between them wasn't shifting anymore. It was settling. By mid-November, Graham Whitaker's car no longer turned heads in the tiny town just off Route 41. The sleek black sedan that once looked out of place among rusted pickup trucks and dusty minivans had become a familiar sight outside Sonny's Café and the elementary school down the road. People stopped wondering why a man in a pressed dress shirt spent his afternoons hauling flour or fixing broken light fixtures. They started greeting him by name instead. Morning, Graham, old Mr. Jenkins called one Thursday as Graham stepped out of the car with a box of fresh produce. Got your hands full today? Just carrots and commitment, Graham replied, adjusting the box and flashing a grin. The cafe had grown busier lately. Maybe it was the cooler weather. Maybe the smell of Anna's cinnamon rolls drifting into the street. Or maybe people just liked seeing something good take root in a place that hadn't changed in years. Whatever it was, Graham had become part of the rhythm. Not the lead, just part. He'd pick up Ellie from school, her backpack bouncing as she ran toward him with a half-eaten apple and a new story every day. They'd walk back together, her hand in his, talking about volcanoes, planets, or what animal made the best pet. This week, a sea otter. He helped her with math homework at the front booth. While sipping cocoa, she insisted on making herself too much powder, not enough milk, always lukewarm. He drank every cup anyway. At the cafe, he fixed the leaky pipe beneath the sink, re-screwed the hinges on the back door, and quietly replaced the flickering kitchen light bulb before Anna even noticed it was out. He didn't make a fuss about it. He didn't announce every small thing he did. He just did them like they were his to care for. One evening, after the dinner crowd had thinned and Ellie had gone upstairs to her room, Graham and Anna sat on the back porch behind the cafe. A soft wind stirred the trees, carrying the scent of baked apples and firewood from somewhere nearby. The stars overhead were bright, unmarred by city lights. Graham had his sleeves rolled up, his forearms resting on his thighs, a mug of hot cocoa in one hand. Anna curled her fingers around her own cup, quiet but not withdrawn. They sat like that often now, in silence that didn't need filling. She told her teacher you're building her a treehouse, Anna said finally, her voice light, amused. Graham smiled. She did? She even drew a blueprint. It had a slide and a telescope and a cookie drawer. Well, he said, sipping the cocoa, I guess I'd better get to work. Anna laughed softly, but then her voice dipped into something more thoughtful. She's been happier lately, calmer. She sleeps easier. Graham looked over at her. That's because she feels safe. Anna nodded, eyes still on the dark horizon. I forgot how much noise loneliness makes until the quiet changed. They didn't speak for a while. Somewhere inside, Ellie's faint singing carried through the screen door. Graham turned to Anna. This is the part I missed, the ordinary. It's not always this peaceful, she said. Sometimes it's tantrums and spilled syrup and laundry that never ends. I'll take it, he said simply. All of it. Anna looked at him now, really looked, at the way his shoulders had relaxed over the weeks, at the way his laugh had found its way back into the world. He wasn't the same man who walked into her cafe, lost and untethered. He was different now, grounded. Why didn't you ever come back? She asked quietly, not with accusation, just curiosity. Before. He swallowed. I think I was afraid if I did, I'd see what I'd given up, and that it would be too late. Maybe it was, she said softly. He nodded. Maybe. But if this is what second chances look like, I'll take whatever's left. Anna didn't answer, but she didn't pull away when he shifted slightly closer either. Later that night, after Graham had gone and the dishes were done, Anna stood in Ellie's doorway, watching her daughter sleep. The little girl clutched a plush giraffe and breathed slow, contented breaths. She looked peaceful, and Anna felt it, that question rising again, quiet but persistent. Is it possible to find something real again? Not just for Ellie, but for me? She didn't have the answer, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer afraid to ask. Snow had begun to fall sometime after dinner, light at first, just a lazy drift of white against the black windows. But by the time Graham flipped the cafe's sign to closed, the world outside had gone quiet beneath a thick, powdery blanket. The wind had softened, and everything looked hushed and dreamlike. Inside, the cafe was warm and glowing with the soft yellow light of string bulbs Anna had tacked along the windows earlier that week. Ellie stood on a wooden chair in the corner, carefully hanging glitter-covered snowflake ornaments onto the branches of a tabletop Christmas tree. Be careful, Anna called from behind the counter. That one's glass. I got it, Mommy, Ellie said, her tongue poking out in concentration. I'm almost done. Graham knelt beside the crate of ornaments, holding one shaped like a gingerbread man with one leg missing. Where does this guy go? Bottom, Ellie instructed, so he doesn't fall off again. Anna chuckled softly as she came over, drying her hands on a dish towel. She's a serious tree boss. Graham grinned. She takes after you. They finished decorating the tiny tree together, stepping back to admire their handiwork, a mix of candy canes, mismatched baubles, and one string of lights that flickered every third bulb. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Ellie yawned mid-sentence while trying to explain why their star was crooked on purpose, and Graham gently scooped her into his arms. She didn't protest, just curled into him with complete trust, her head resting on his shoulder, one arm dangling. "I'll tuck her in," he said quietly. Anna nodded and opened the apartment door behind the cafe. Upstairs, in Ellie's room, Graham pulled back the blanket on her little bed and lowered her carefully onto the mattress. She mumbled something sleepily, then smiled. "Night, Daddy," she whispered. His chest tightened. "Good night, Peanut," he said, brushing a curl from her forehead. When he returned downstairs, Anna was sitting on the love seat near the front window, cocoa in her hands, watching the snow fall beneath the streetlight. The cafe was quiet now, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the heater in the corner. Graham sat beside her, their shoulders close, but not touching. "She's calling me Daddy now," he said softly. "She chose it on her own," Anna replied. "I didn't push it. I didn't expect it so soon." "She trusts easily," she said, then after a beat, "but not blindly." Graham looked at her, the lines of her face softened in the glow of the lights. She looked tired, but a different kind of tired than the woman he first saw in that kitchen doorway weeks ago. Less guarded, less alone. "I meant what I said," he began, voice thick with the weight of it. "I didn't come back just to patch things up for Ellie. I didn't come back because I was lonely or guilty or nostalgic. I came back because somewhere between those burnt pancakes and school drop-offs and cocoa that tastes like chalk, I found something I didn't know I was still allowed to want." Anna turned to him slowly, her eyes already shimmering. "I don't want to co-parent," he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I want to come home. I want this. You. Her. The whole messy, beautiful, ordinary life. Marry me." The words settled like snow-soft, but undeniable. Anna blinked, and tears slid silently down her cheeks. She didn't look away. She didn't answer right away either. Graham sat still, not moving to close the space between them, letting her feel it, weigh it, breathe in the moment without pressure. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You being here, it's changed everything, and I love what it's becoming. But marriage, it's not just about showing up now, it's about staying when things get hard again." "I know," he said gently. "That's why I'm not asking you to say yes tonight. I'm just asking you to know it's real, that I'm not leaving." She nodded slowly, wiping at her cheek with the back of her hand. "Every day you're here," she whispered, "you get closer." Graham exhaled, then leaned over and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Light, steady, unhurried. They sat like that for a long time, the snow falling outside, the little cafe warm with something unspoken but growing stronger by the hour. The next morning, Ellie padded into the kitchen in fuzzy socks and pajamas covered in dancing reindeer. Graham was already there, pouring pancake batter into the griddle while humming a tune off key. She climbed onto a stool and yawned. "Hey, Peanut," he said, turning to her with a smile. "Daddy," she said, eyes half-lidded, "can you live with us forever?" Graham set the bowl down and came around the counter, kneeling so they were eye level. "I plan to, baby girl," he said. "Forever sounds just about right." By the time spring settled into the sleepy Tennessee town, everything had changed, quietly but profoundly. The frost had melted. The trees lining Main Street bloomed with soft white blossoms. Windows were cracked open again, and at the corner cafe, with peeling red paint and a front door that still creaked, laughter spilled out before the first bell of the day even rang. The old sign out front had been replaced. Hand-carved by a local artist and stained a warm walnut, it now read, "Brooks and Whitaker Cafe, family owned." Anna insisted Graham's name come second. He didn't argue. Inside, the cafe bustled. Regulars filled their usual spots. Tourists stopped to take photos of the tiny tree in the window, still decorated with Easter Bunny ornaments Ellie refused to take down. And Graham no longer a man in a suit, but one in rolled-up sleeves and sneakers, smudged with flour, moved between tables like he'd been born to pour coffee. He smiled more now, and not just the polite kind, the kind that reached into the corners of his face, where laugh lines had returned, the kind that belonged to a man who had stopped building walls and started building a life. "Refill, Mr. Jenkins?" Graham asked, holding up the pot. "Third one this morning," the old man chuckled. "What are you trying to do, keep me awake till July?" "Only if you want dessert." Across the room, Anna called out the next order with a smirk. "Tell him to behave or I'll hide the pie." Their rhythm was easy now, unforced, lived in. And just like that, a place that had once been held together by hope and elbow grease now felt like home. That afternoon, the cafe closed early. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Closed from 2 to 5 for something important." Because today wasn't just any day. It was Ellie's school talent show. The tiny auditorium buzzed with parents and folding chairs, the stage framed by plastic tulips and string lights blinking unevenly. Anna wore a floral dress. Graham had a tie that Ellie picked bright purple with tiny dinosaurs. They sat front row, elbows touching, the seats too close together and not close enough all at once. When Ellie stepped onto the stage in a sparkly pink skirt and butterfly wings, she beamed so hard it made Graham's throat tighten. She held the mic like a pro, took a deep breath, and began to sing. She was off-key. She forgot the second verse. Her hands flapped awkwardly at one point, like she wasn't sure what to do with them. But she didn't stop, and when she finished, with a triumphant bow and glitter on her nose, the entire room erupted in applause. Anna stood and clapped with both hands, laughing through tears. Graham whooped loud enough to make the boy next to him jump. Ellie ran off stage and into the wings, her little face flushed with pride. Later that night, the three of them curled up in the booth near the front window of the cafe. The lights were off, but the soft glow of the street lamp poured in through the blinds. Anna rested her head on Graham's shoulder, and Ellie lay stretched across the seat, legs tucked under her, humming softly as she picked apart the fringe on her sweater. Graham reached into his jacket pocket for his phone and instead pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Crayon, construction paper, bold lines. 3 familiar stick figures stood under a big, crooked sun. Only this time, above them, in shaky red letters, was a banner that read, "Home." He held the drawing in both hands, heart aching in the best way. It wasn't perfect. Life rarely was. But for the first time, in as long as he could remember, it didn't need to be. He looked over at Anna, then at Ellie, who had now curled up against his side, already half asleep. And in that quiet, golden hour, Graham Whitaker realized the truth he'd spent a lifetime missing. He had built empires with steel and screens, but all it took to feel whole again was a paper crown, a plate of pancakes, and a little girl calling him daddy.